involved in street gang organizing at the age of 19. He is self-educated, having obtained his HSED, I had to look that up, high school equivalency diploma, while serving a 20-year sentence in the state of Wisconsin. Prior to being released from prison, Mr. Jackson made a decision to dedicate his life to help end mass incarceration. In November of 2019, Mr. Jackson received the Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition of the Elijah O'Neal Award of Excellence, and also the Elijah O'Neal Service Award by Project Return for his commitment to aid those who are returning to their communities after incarceration. Let's welcome Mr. Sylvester Jackson.
Thank you all. First, I would like to thank the Professor Enright, who has really been instrumental in the course of life that I'm now living. Thanks for the invitation to come and share in a different perspective of forgiveness. I would like to thank my wife, my helpmate, amen, who has shown me agape love every day and continue to do so, in spite of my little ways, okay? Yeah. So anyway, Expo is an organization that works around prison reform. Our whole mission is to end mass incarceration and all systems that feeds it. But on a note in which I'm here to speak on is a different note. It's about the power of forgiveness. And I'm going to introduce two different individuals to you today. And with the time allowed, where's my timekeeper so I can keep my eyes on you? All righty. With the time allowed, I will just go through things until questioning, but I want to introduce the old me. The old me grew up, I was fourth out of 11 children. I grew up in the first 11 years with a family, father, mother, sisters, and brothers. That ended abruptly in '76 when my family divorced. My mother and father divorced, which again is something that is all too often in our community. And all the pressure was put on my mother to raise 11 children. And within those years of upcoming, from the age of 7 to the age of 12 and a half, I was sexually abused by my friend, my sister's best friend, who she used to babysit us. But in a time when I grew up, you know, men was not allowed to show emotion. You know, we are boys, growing men, we got to be strong. And so we had to hide those things in the back of our minds and grow. I grew up in poverty that most people from other countries don't realize happens in this country, where there was times we went without food. We stayed in a community where the rats was bigger than the cats. In fact, my cat was killed by rats. Yeah, really. And you know, so we grew up in a community that was plagued with violence. So I was introduced to violence at an early age. The first episode was my father feeling he can slap my mother and realized that ain't the way it goes. My mother turned around and stabbed him, pretty much, almost killed him. Then we realized the streets that we lived in was also orchestrated with predator and prey mentality, kill or be killed. So going to the store can cause death. You know, going to the store one time at the age of 11, I discovered a body that's sitting inside of a truck in our community. So growing up with those kind of things and trauma, because let's admit that's trauma for any child to grow up with. And looking at the situation with my mother and getting tired of seeing her suffer trying to raise us, I put the pressure of helping her when I was only a child myself. So my hatred began in that moment because I started off hating my father for putting my mother in the way that she was. That hatred only grew over the years when I realized he was taking care of other people's kids while neglecting his own. And that hatred grew to the point that I was willing to take his life because of the pain that he was causing me. I found myself gravitating towards the streets because to me, the streets was the answer because the street demanded respect. The streets demanded protection, reputations. And I willingly choose, after being raised in godliness in a Christian home, I made a choice to step outside of that and go into a world that I felt I could more relate to, where evil was prevalent, where evil was the cause of the day. I willingly choose to go into a place that God did not create for man to enter, just to establish peace in the way I thought it would come, out of respect, fear. Only thing about fear, it has no ending. Evil has no ending. When we say agape love, that's a love that is unconditional. It has no ending to it. And to appreciate agape love, you have to first learn how to understand darkness. And that's where my journey started. My journey started when I went out into the streets and I started using my language to recruit young men, young women to be a part of a criminal empire. I built up organizations in 3 states to do evil. I had thousands of individuals at my command. Power was the call of the day. I had individuals that all I had to do is suggest the worst, and it will come. That's the evil that God has brought me away from. And I know some of you be like, oh, but you have to understand that's what I grew into because of what I knew. I knew that I was doing wrong, but I had a mindset that it was no in between life. You choose good or you choose bad. It's the choices that we make even today. The choices we make today would dictate whether other people are heard, healed, saved, or restored based upon what we decide to do today. Well, I didn't decide sooner than I should have. I chose to take evil to another level, which led me to a place that I only can describe as inhuman. Because when you have a conscience, you're limited to what you can do in terms of when you know it's wrong. At that time, I literally seen a reflection in the mirror of what I had allowed myself to become. And I only can describe it as a monster. It was not human. When my mother, who was to me, it was God, it was Christ, and then it was my mother. In that order. My prayer since the age of 12 years old was never to see my mother die, to be put in the ground. And I prayed that prayer to God with everything I had in me. 2002, my worst fears came true when my mother passed. And I held God accountable. I blamed him for the hurt, the pain, the misery, and the lifelessness that I felt in me. I separated myself from God. Apostasy in the greatest form. I didn't want anything to do with God, and I didn't want God to have anything to do with me. But the one thing I did understand later on is that his love is agape love. It doesn't judge us according to what we deserve. It judges us according to what he has, and that's grace and mercy. But after my mother passed on, I had a mental relapse that led me down a road that was twice as worse than before. Eventually, I went and checked myself into a mental health hospital. It was the only way that I could stop myself from going into a mass killing. I had created a hit list of everyone that hurted me and intend to go through one name at a time to act revenge. But the only way I could stop that, I went to the hospital, they admitted me. They diagnosed me with depression, anxiety. They said I had a tendency of suicidal and homicidal intentions. From that, I began to disregard the laws and I ended up in prison. But the greatest thing that I'm here to tell you today is that when they sentenced me to 20 years of physical incarceration, I became aware of the 26 years of mental incarceration that I suffered. Because it was when I was in there in the physical form inside the prison system where I had time to reflect on my life and what it meant, the hurt I caused, the hurt that was caused to me. And it began to cause me to rethink things. But I believe in 2015, a curriculum was passed around, a flyer came around the prison. I was in maximum. And this flyer come around asking who want to join a forgiveness class. I didn't want to join no forgiveness class. I just wanted to get out the cell. Let's not make any mistakes about it. When you're in maximum, you're locked up 23 hours a day. You're allowed 1 hour to shower and make calls. So I didn't care about forgiveness. I just wanted however many hours they're going to give us in that group, I wanted it. So I signed up. And I just could not imagine in a max prison, it's the worst of the worst that society throw away because they say there's no hope. So me and a group of other throwaways, we all come in this room, had no idea on what we can expect. One thing all of us said, we ain't talking. Ain't nobody sharing nothing. I mean, I'm like, I ain't got nothing to say to nobody, and yet the second day I started getting loose. You know, it's like some start like happening, like, wait a minute, I can relate to that. But the third day, I remember a question was asked by the chaplain that began my road to where I am. Who hurt you? That was power. That question was the first time in my life that anyone asked me about my pain. When you're in prison, even if you're in there for 50 years, every year you go up for review. It doesn't matter if you was the greatest prisoner they ever had in their institution, they only want to tell you about what you've done. They don't want to talk about what you accomplished. But that day, that third day, when we was asked, who hurt you? It gave me a moment to reflect on the pain that I tried to hide, cover, and didn't want to address. And that opened up something in me. And then I began to go back, like they say, picture that person. Well, I had a choir. There was not one person I can just pick, so I just put them all in a group and be like, yeah, that is. And as I reflect on each one, the worst was the physical and the mental abuse. Of course, I come from a father who was raised during plantation times, where they called it Jim Crow in the South, where he was beaten at the age of 4 years old because he went to school and studied the cotton fields. So he did not know how to be a father to me. But when I learned that information, it began to click a light on why he was the way he was and why he didn't know anything about parenting. His whole life, I never heard him say he loved none of his children because he never was introduced to that love. You know and you share what you understand. So in prison, when that came around and we began to go through the book and talking, then I realized, wait a minute, I don't have to be that old man. I don't have to, because I have a choice from that point on to be something different, someone better. If I had died in the streets of Chicago, I'm sure my name would have been in the record for probably one of the most silliest individuals to die for stupidity, which it was. You're fighting for something that you don't even own. You're fighting for land that you have no lease on. But if I'm willing to change my life today, and if I lose my life doing something to help somebody else live, then I believe the agape love that saved me will also secure me after this journey is over. So I made a decision, and that day, when I went back to my cell after I got my certificate, I got laughed at when I went back on the unit, but I was laughing inside. I was like, yeah, y'all gonna still be here when I'm out there. Yeah. Yeah, y'all keep on laughing. I'm gonna laugh my way through the gate. And the thing was, I had made up in my mind. I made a real decision in my life to not rely on drugs to be who I am. So I went to the psychologist and I told him the bad news. I'm not taking your medication no more. He looked like, you can't do it. I said, oh, yes, I can. And if you want to stop me, you have to go through the court system. By then, I'll be out anyway, so I'm not taking it. And that was a decision that I made from there to now. 15 going on 16 years, I'm drug-free, tobacco-free, alcohol-free, and foolish-free. I knew when I came from behind the walls, my mind was made up. And there was nothing, because I knew the only thing could stop me was me. And I got out of my way. So I said, God, if you're with me, I'm gonna make this journey to the day I die. So when I walked out, good old Wisconsin, they released me in the community after 10 years, no money, no support, no family, no resources, no transportation, no housing. And they literally said, we'll see you in a couple of months, but they said, go ahead and be successful. Well, it's like going telling a carpenter to go build you a porch and he ain't got no tools. You know what I'm saying? You have to have the tools to do those things. But even then, I was determined nothing would stop me. So I came out and I started cleaning toilets. And my rationale was okay, in prison I was making 28 cents an hour. How can I say no to 9? So I did whatever it took, because my mind was on a bigger picture. If I can overcome, I can reach back and pull someone else when they coming up this way. And when I got out of prison, I remember when I finally met Professor Enright, and he came up there, and I was like, wow, he looked like the nerd friend that I never had, you know? Growing up, you always wanted that nerd friend that was smart to help you do the computers and things. So I'm like, wow. But The minute he began to speak to the group, you just felt power. That was power. And I'll never forget what I told him. I say, to me, the greatest enemy of hatred and anger is forgiveness. When you learn to forgive someone, it's not for them, it's for you. Because the harder thing that I had to fight was forgiving myself. But I realized that if God can forgive me, then I can forgive myself too. And when I walked out of prison, the first thing I said, I'm going to find Professor Enright. Literally. That was one of the first things that I told myself. I said, because it was one gentleman that did this group with us in prison, and he had been in Max for 20 years. It's almost, you had to be the worst of the worst to be in maximum for 20 years. But he had so much anger and bitterness in him, he wasn't able to adjust to go down. And yet, after the program, 2 months later, he was in medium. That's the impact that the forgiveness program had in that prison. It changed his life. It changed my life. And now God has allowed me to change other people's lives. I share my story not for sympathy, but just so people can understand there's hope. Each one of us, we close our eyes and we think of the worst thing ever happened to us in life, no matter how tragic it was. And when we open them, we're still here. In many cases, we're stronger than we were before those things that hurt us. And we might be just being that way, but we're not broken to pieces. And with the programs we're doing here, I love the fact that they're working all over the world on the youth. But can we imagine the impact that we're having in Milwaukee now, that we're introducing healing through forgiveness, to restore families when they come home, where they went to prison and their children was 3 years old, now they're 25, 26. There needs to be a restoration. There must be forgiven on both parties, from both sides, the parent and the child, in order to restore that family, in order to be productive in our community. So I thank Dr. Enright and everyone who put this together, and I'm glad to be a part of it, because my true desire is to create something so when I'm no longer part of living in the equation, it will still exist to change other people's lives. Thank you so much.